when we talk about culture, very often when we talk about someone's culture or someone's identity, we talk about it in a single dimension. So you mentioned like Argentinian or Fish or Chinese, and we'll put that label on us. And it's almost as if we put that label on ourselves and use it in isolation. But in reality, humans are multidimensional, right? We have so many different layers that make up the individual. And therefore, the individual has a very unique cultural lens. And you can say that, say, the country that they were born in or the ethnicity that they are, the religion that they have, has a large influence in terms of the way that they're going to behave. But ultimately, there are so many other labels that they could put on themselves. And when you bring them all together, then it creates kind of a unique placement for where that person's going to behave, culturally speaking.
When we talk about immigrants and numbers, we stop seeing people. But when we put faces to the stories, we can finally feel.
I might say your name right, Isabelle or
Isabelle, yes.
Isabelle, right? Okay, I want to make sure I say it right. Anyways, I was looking into LinkedIn and acting with people, and I saw one of your posts, right, about that you live in Singapore and you're from England and you're also an immigrant. So I want you to introduce yourself and kind of tell people need to know who you are. It'd be nice that you explain them, and then we can go into the conversation and questions and stuff like that.
Sure. Well, definitely, I've got a nice, confusing background for a lot of people. So I'm currently based in Singapore and I've been here for about 8 years now. But I am half French, half British, and have spent some time living in the UK, in France, but also in Japan, because Japanese was part of my university studies. So I've moved around quite a lot. And then one really big shift that came later in life, I married my university sweetheart, who happened to be from a British-born Chinese background. So his family is ethnically from Hong Kong, which means I have Asian in-laws. And so we've mixed it up really nicely there in terms of having a very multicultural mix in the household.
Wow. That's awesome. Actually, in my personal life, I'm also, my wife is Ukrainian, so we are in a mixed cultural relationship. And it's very interesting, but it's also this beautiful thing about speaking we speak 3 different languages here: Ukrainian, English, and Spanish. So it gets confusing. My daughter's like, she doesn't know what to speak, and we don't even know what we're speaking. We even have our own words that we made up. You guys do the same? I don't know.
Oh, we do. Well, I don't know if we have our own words, but we very, very easily flip from one language to another, depending on the situation that we're in. So me and my husband were always joking about the fact that we met through Japanese. That's how we got to know each other. And we'll swap very automatically to Japanese when we're out doing our shopping. Not because we're, whispering behind people's backs and saying, oh, what's that person doing? Not for anything like that. It's literally just us like shouting errands at each other and saying, can you go fetch this? Can you go fetch that? But I think just the fact that you're switching to another language feels like you're in your own little world and other people aren't going to suddenly join in that conversation. I think it's a form of intimacy, I guess, as weird as it may sound. And I've had that all my life. When I was growing up in my household, it was a bilingual household. My dad is French, my mum is English. And we would swap mid-sentence from one language to another, depending on where we were in terms of like situation, or sometimes just because there are words that better express the thing that you want to say in one language than they are in another language. I don't know if you get that among the languages that you have.
Yeah.
There are certain words that I will say to my husband. We'll be talking in English and then I'll suddenly throw a Japanese word in there because the Japanese word captures the essence of what I want to say way better than anything I can think of in English. We do that all the time.
All right. So, for example, in my case, I rather use English sometimes, even if it's not my first language, because I speak less. So, the sentences and the way you write also is less than in Spanish, for example, because that's my first language. So a sentence in Spanish is way longer than in English. So for me, I get lazy. I can say something I want to say in Spanish in 3 words versus typing more. So, and one word can have different meanings. So I'm like, so I don't know. Sometimes I type in English because I get lazy, but I could also do it in Spanish. But in Spanish, interesting enough, I got to think a little bit more.
Yeah.
But even if I don't have to speak English like a native person, I've been here for so long, and believe it or not, I speak English all day. I don't speak Spanish, like my wife is Ukrainian, but I don't speak any better English. It's just the way it is. If I tell people I speak English every day, and sometimes I mix words with Spanish and English, that's a reality. I don't do it on purpose, but my brain is constantly speaking English. I work everything. It's a daily thing, but I just not get any better. I don't know why. I should have
Well,
a perfect accent, but I
science
don't.
would say my dad has been living in the UK for must be a good 30 years now, and he's never lost his very, very, very thick French accent.
Right.
But some of the vocabulary that he has, my mum was a literature major, and sometimes my dad will throw out this beautiful, eloquent, and articulate English phrasing to me, and I'm thinking to myself, how the hell did that come
Right.
out? Like,
Right.
how did you get that? But that's the point I wanted to make. There was something that you said. Oh, it was about language acquisition.
Right.
And something that I think is really beautiful about the bilingual brain that I've read in scientific studies is essentially when you are speaking one of the languages that you know, the brain still fires off all the languages at the same time. So if I speak 3 languages well, I would say, I speak English, French, and Japanese well. And so when I'm speaking in English, the reality is actually my brain is still firing off French and Japanese at the same time, and it's choosing to focus on the English track. But occasionally the brain gets confused and therefore fires off the wrong language. So you end up with a mix, which
Right.
I've always found absolutely fascinating.
I didn't know that, but you being a communication
Yeah.
expert, I'm sure you know all the things. You know, I didn't
Well,
know.
that's slightly different from my day job when we say
Right.
communications, because when I do communications for businesses, then it's more about your branding, your messaging, your narrative. How do
Right.
you tell stories that resonate with people's hearts?
Right.
But my background from a university training perspective is linguistics and language acquisition. So I studied languages, and if I geek out about one thing in this world, it's that. I love languages.
Right. Love languages. I don't know if I can learn them. I don't know if I'm that passionate about it. I do like just speak multiple languages if I could. I do love culture. I know that's something you're into it, right? And I know
Yes.
I'm passionate about culture. What drives me to have this podcast is, first of all, I love people. I'm a people person. I like to communicate. I like to talk, have fun, joke around. I do it on my work environment. That's the way I am. And meeting people on different countries, different cultures, just something I'm passionate about.
Mm.
I just always interested in human behavior. And if you go to different countries, people have different food, different dishes, might use the different ingredients, some ingredients that we use it, but they just come up with something different.
Yeah.
And that just is something about that, right? That it gave my attention. So when I saw your article, because when I'm searching and looking for things, I have one of your articles pop. I guess the algorithm showed me that what you were doing, and it was the first one I saw was with, I think it's your husband on the picture.
Very
Well,
possible.
yeah, and where you're talking about the mixed culture, you married to a different culture, that kind of stuff. It's like, oh man, I'm interested about this, and then that you living in Singapore. So how is the life in Singapore for you? How do you think, are you an immigrant? How do you see yourself? Do you see as an immigrant in Singapore, or you just see just like one more person?
I definitely see myself as an immigrant in Singapore,
Right, right,
but one that has been very welcomed, which I think is a lovely testament to the way that the country is run. So, for people who don't know very much about Singapore, it's a tiny, tiny state nation based in Southeast Asia. So, it's close
right,
to places like Malaysia and Thailand and Indonesia.
right,
But its history is that of a port city. So it's a tiny, tiny island, and because it was a port, one of the major ports of the world throughout historical times, then it was also a really important meeting point where a lot of cultures from around Asia Pacific came so they could find work around the port and
right,
sell their goods and things like that. And so now modern day Singapore actually has 4 national ethnicities, 4 national languages. You've got your majority ethnically Chinese constituency, if you can call it that. Then you have very significant minority ethnicities from Malay background, from Indian background, and then they call them Eurasian, which is essentially where the
Interesting.
mixing has happened.
Right.
But
I
these are
never heard
considered
that.
it's Eurasian. It's it's actually on my daughter's birth certificates.
Oh,
Like you have to select what ethnic background you
really?
come from, and well, they're mixed, so we called them Eurasian because what else could it
Wow.
be?
That's interesting.
But yeah, it's a thing. It's an official thing in Singapore, as are the 4 languages. So you have
Right.
Chinese, you have Tamil, one of the Indian languages, one of the many Indian
Mm-hmm.
languages. You have Malay, and then you have English, and 4 national languages, 4 national ethnic minorities, etc., that make up Singapore. So I think what's really interesting about this country is right from the get-go, its whole ethos is bridging cultural differences and bridging cultural perspectives, because you've got all these 4 very different cultures blending together and finding
Right.
ways to create a nation to move forward. So I would say that when I moved to Singapore, I would like to have thought of myself as someone who
Right.
was culturally savvy, culturally astute, someone who really loved exploring different cultures and different
Right.
languages. But it's with the power of hindsight, I come to the realization that actually I knew nothing. I
Right.
had barely scratched the surface, and Singapore really taught me to start asking what I consider to be the right questions. So instead of thinking that's really weird, or this country is just going to be like this because
Right.
they're in their own little universe, I started wondering, well, why? Why is it that the behavior has manifested itself in this way? Like, I'm
Right.
curious, what is the background behind this? What is people's rationale and logic? Because clearly it's very different from my rationale and logic, and they're
Right.
coming to a different conclusion. And yeah, it was just going through day-to-day interactions in Singapore that I really started to, I think, really feel how important it was to stop for a second, pause for a second, listen, look around, and maybe ask yourself, is what you're thinking the only possible way to think or approach something? Probably not. It's
Right.
just we've spent so long with our own perspective and our own lens kind of clouding our vision that sometimes it's hard to realize that you're in it until you get a moment to step out of it.
Right. Such a powerful thing you say, because I never explain it the way you explain it, but one of the things I did when I came to the US was this is one thing that my dad told me. I want to say where this is coming from. My dad told me, first of all, before you criticize people, because one of the things you heard when you come here is like, everybody's racist. Right? That's what I was told. But my dad told me, first, the only way you know people that are racist is by knowing them. So you need to learn the language and you need to learn the culture. So that was the first advice I got from my dad. My dad at that time was like 40 something, and he already had that knowledge. He's like, you need to get to know people. Don't isolate yourself by joining your community of Spanish people. Go out there, try to meet people, try to learn the culture, try to blend with the culture as much as you can, learn, right? And that gave me the opportunity, first of all, as an immigrant, to have an easier life, because you're constantly comparing, right? Or thinking, missing your country, or criticizing the local culture. But you, for example, you had to go through that and learn, okay, let me ask the right question. Let me ask why they're doing it. Why is this way? And as you start learning and asking this proper question, and then you start adopting, right? And slowly and accepting, right? Adopting and accepting, because it's not going to be the way you want it, but that's the way it is. And accepting, and it makes your life easier. And that's some of the things I did. That's what I never agree with a lot of the other things that immigrants do in other countries, right? And I'm talking about things like complaining, right? You came here, right? And you're complaining. Come on, I mean, I'm an immigrant too, and I'm not against immigration, but what you should say, that's the smartest thing I ever heard, because I learned that. That's how you got to do it, right? You got to learn. And some people will still discriminate you, don't like you, regardless. But the majority of people will adopt you as one of them, just by approaching them that way. So you left England because you married your husband, or you left you guys said, oh,
No,
this,
so
yeah.
I think it's really funny that you mentioned that story just now. The honest reason that we left the UK is when Brexit came into play. Do you know what Brexit is? It's essentially when the UK voted to leave the European Union and go
I
out on
know.
its own.
Yes, right.
And it was kind of something that I found very difficult to accept, because I've always been brought up not as British or French, but somewhere in between. So I would have considered myself as European. And the UK saying that it no longer wanted to be part of Europe was essentially almost as if it was denying what I believe my identity to be. And it was a very difficult time, I think, for any immigrant community in the UK, because a lot of the anger and a lot of the justification that was coming out for why Brexit was important at the time did focus on immigration policy. For right or for wrong, this isn't so much about which side of the politics you sit on, but the reality is that that was one of the big underlying tones that came out in a lot of the debates and a lot of the discussions. And so once it went through, we found that people were looking at me and my husband, aka a multiracial, multi-ethnic couple, in a very different light. Some very positive, some allies, some wanting to be champions, some essentially saying nothing's changed. But then you got others who felt like the voice that they had kept hidden for so long, with all their angst and all their anger and all their frustration about how things were going in the UK, they started to feel more validated to be able to say things that in other circumstances they wouldn't have said.
Right.
It's one of those things where it was very hurtful at the time that suddenly all of this abuse was kind of coming out of the closet, and people were voicing up their frustrations in a way that they hadn't done before. At the same time, again, now that I've had a bit of time to digest and process what happened, I do think there's something to be said for, how to put this, it is not right for us to dismiss a voice and a concern that we don't like just because we don't like it.
Right.
There is pain behind those concerns. There's real frustrations behind those concerns. And if we just turn around and say, but that's not liberal, that's not freedom, that's not inclusivity, whatever veil we want to put on it, if we go around and deny people and say, well, you're wrong to say that because this isn't the way that the world should be moving, then all we're going to do is reinforce that anger and reinforce that frustration. And I don't think that's doing anyone any favors. So I think over time, I've learned that actually it's better to do your best to try and understand the perspective of the other side. I'm still not going to agree with the other side, but I really, really do want to understand where they're coming from and understand their logic, because if nothing else, maybe we'll be able to get to a point where we're able to respect each other's decisions, even if we wouldn't necessarily make the same one ourselves.
Absolutely. Yes. I think we're going through that right now in the US, right? With all the freedom of speech and stuff. I'm not political. I don't I don't trust politicians, no matter what side they are. And I believe that when you put a label to yourself, either right or I'm right, I'm left, Republican or Democrat, whatever, you're dividing yourself, right? They simply say, well, I am Argentinian or I'm Chinese. Well, you're identifying by something, by either culture or nationality, and it divides people. Right. I don't think back in the day when we didn't have all these divisions, country divisions on state lines or country lines or anything or borders, people were identifying like that. People they were free in the land. They just do whatever they need to do. And you meet someone, it was just someone. But today we label each other, and that label people divide us. And I think politicians divide us. And what you saw and the reason why you left at that moment, that you couldn't understand what's going on, it was just, again, politicians dividing people, and you decided to leave. But today you say, well, maybe I could be more flexible if I understand that someone can think different than me. And that's the way you do it. But that's not the politician intentions. They want to divide you because the division control people. But
to a degree, I agree with you to a degree. I think labels make people feel safe. When you have a label, it means that you belong to a certain culture, a certain community. So it makes you feel less alone. But I think one of the things that I always try to remind people of is that when we talk about culture, very often when we talk about someone's culture or someone's identity, we talk about it in a single dimension. So you mentioned like Argentinian or British or Chinese, and we'll put that label on us. And it's almost as if we put that label on ourselves and use it in isolation. But in reality, humans are multidimensional, right? We have so many different layers that make up the individual. And therefore, the individual has a very unique cultural lens. You can say that, say the country that they were born in or the ethnicity that they are, the religion that they have, has a large influence in terms of the way that they're going to behave. But ultimately, there are so many other labels that they could put on themselves. And when you bring them all together, then it creates kind of a unique placement for where that person's going to behave, culturally speaking. So if I was looking at myself, I mean, you could say British, French, Caucasian, female, but you could also say things like, I'm someone who loves Chinese dramas, or I'm
Yeah.
someone who is stage trained and I love musical theater, or you could say that I'm someone who loves the outdoors. And all of these small things are going to layer up to create my perspective of the world, which is going to be different to your perspective, which is going to be
Right.
different to my husband's perspective.
Right.
And so I think labels give us an opportunity to find a tribe, but we have to be careful that we don't think one label is our defining moment, or two labels, or three labels. And we have to understand that there is so much going on in our lives that make us who we are, that we shouldn't be confining ourselves to one space. That's my personal
Right.
belief, anyway.
Yeah, I guess I agree with you. I think there's a very fine line, and that's what I think the way you said is perfect. I mean, I'm gonna be Argentinian. I mean, I'm happy to be Argentinian, right? That's my label, and I'm gonna
Mm,
dilate that. And I didn't mean it like to that extreme, right? But to the sense where it's intentionally created to divide people, right? Yeah, a group could make you feel safe. I agree, right? Because if you migrate to a new country, your first instinct is to meet people like you
mm,
because they got there before you. Like if you migrate to Spain or you migrate to England or Singapore, if you find a group of Argentina, that's probably your first instinct as a new person in a new country. Go see them, right?
absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
yes, I agree with you. I think you can definitely not use label. There's good explanation why you just say it very well, and I'm glad you explained that to the audience. But there's some cases where it's used uh, with bad intentions. One is
Mm,
politically speaking, and I don't want to be left or right. I'm just a human being that loves
mm,
people, and I'm pretty sure that you in Singapore with your husband and me here in the US with my wife, we probably have similar goals, not that much different of what we want in life. So yeah, we probably use different tools, different jobs. Maybe we like different color houses or whatever. But we all want the basic, right? But on the other hand, politicians sell us different ideas and make them fight with each other. But why are we gonna fight? I mean, no matter who we vote, we have very similar interests. We can disagree and agree on some other thing. Maybe on we can disagree on immigration. We can disagree on I don't know gay people or whatever they want to do. There's some things that we're gonna disagree, but in most. But if we sit down as human beings, right? In most of the time, we have a bigger percentage that we are very compatible, that we have similar
mm,
goals, and that
yeah.
should override any other stuff that you disagree.
Mm,
Anyway, maybe because I'm getting older, I'm thinking like that. As I was younger, I was a little more on fire, but now I'm more calm.
yeah.
That's the way
And
I think.
I agree with you. This is one of my favorite things to say to people, that I think there is so much more that unites us as a human race than there is that divides us. We very often focus on differences. And I wonder, this is me making a hypothesis. I don't have the scientific studies to back
Ah,
me on this, but
so
the
good.
brain has a tendency towards negativity bias. So it's
Right,
why when we work in communications, you tend to find that a negative headline catches more eyeballs than a positive one does.
right,
And why you tend to find that people, like why doom scrolling has become a thing, right? You just get locked
right,
into your phone because the brain is constantly trying to seek out threats so that
right,
it can circumnavigate them and keep you safe. And so I think when it comes to engaging and interacting with other people, that maybe that comes into play, that idea of, because they're acting differently, is this a threat to me? And I think the challenge for all people really is to turn that threat alarm off for just a little bit and ask yourself, is this actually a threat? Is an affront? Or is it just difference? Difference does not have to be bad or good.
right,
It's just a neutral thing, right?
right, right,
And if you can get your brain to go into that place of neutrality, right? Someone's doing something different. Okay, that's interesting. I'd not really thought about doing it like this before. I don't understand the logic. I don't understand why they've come to that conclusion, but it doesn't necessarily have to be bad.
Right.
So let's explore that. Let's understand the why behind it. Maybe I'll learn something along the way. If we could get people to be more in that frame of mind, then hopefully we would be able to get to a more united populace around the world.
I hope people start waking up that at the end of the day, we're humans, right?
Oh.
I mean, you just said it beautifully. It's if people get that, we will have a better world. There's so many things going on around the world right now that is sad. Especially, I mean, not just war, because I mean, war is horrible, and I'm going through that right now with my wife. But also with immigration, is becoming a bad thing. It's getting toxic. Is right now in the United States, there's a lot of deportation, but this is traveling to Europe, where people talking about immigration in France, you're talking about immigration in Spain, Italy. It's just a hot topic. So I want to talk to people that have something positive to say. I think immigration is not bad. There's definitely bad immigration. I don't disagree, but there's a lot of good immigration too. You one of those, right? People migrate for different reasons. Like you never left England, the UK for financial situation. You left because you were disappointed about something. You want something new. I
Yeah.
mean, that's it. It's not, people don't migrate always for money. And there's all sort of different migration. And I'm trying to find those stories and bring it to light. I think you have a beautiful story. You've been in Singapore. I mean, I'm sure that you struggle with the changes, from such an advanced country like UK moving to Singapore.
You'd be surprised though. Singapore is extremely advanced.
Really?
If anything, I would say in some ways more advanced than the UK was. And I think it's probably down to the size of Singapore because it's small. It's a very small
Right.
country. And we're talking, if I'm not mistaken, we're talking about 6 million inhabitants. Maybe that's grown since the last time I checked the numbers, but
Hmm.
we're really talking essentially the size of a large city.
Wow.
And because it's small, it's very nimble. So it's not scared to test new technologies. It's not
Right.
scared to bring in new experiments. It
Right.
invests heavily into what it believes is going to be future industries and innovation, etc. And let's not forget that Singapore is extremely strategically located. It is. Not that
Right.
they could have designed it better themselves. It
Right.
just happens to be a very,
Right.
very central location for the supply chain industry. And with all of these things, actually, Singapore it's kind of, if we're saying what we're living in the 2020s now, then maybe Singapore is in the 2050s in some ways. Um,
Wow.
it's really quite an advanced society.
Wow.
But there are other things that will have come as culture shocks to me right at the beginning in terms
Right.
of just the way people interact with one another, which was very
Right.
different. Maybe I would have experienced people interacting with one another in the UK, and differences in ideology, differences in the way that they interact with their neighbors, even. I just come from a UK that said, well, we don't want our neighbors. We're going to go do it on our own. We don't want to be part of the European Union. And here in Singapore, they're constantly looking at how can we become a stronger Southeast Asia? How can we become a stronger Asia Pacific? The rhetoric is so collaborative.
Right.
And so it was a culture shock, but more in the positive direction of, wow,
Right.
like there are still places that think like this. And actually, the longer that I live in Asia, the more that I realize that Asia, this is a big, broad, sweeping generalization, but the more that Asia actually typically does think like that, that it is very collaborative in its nature. It thinks about how can I work with my neighbor, even if I disagree with my neighbor, because we are neighbors, and
Wow.
ultimately, Asians are very proud of Asia, and so they want
Right.
Asia to rise, and they know that in order for Asia to do so, it's a collective effort. So you see so much more cross-border interactions, and that leading to positive impact, as
Right.
opposed to what is currently happening a lot in the West, which is more isolationist rhetoric, where, well, we're going to look after ourselves first. Yeah, we got to look after our people, and you can understand it. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Like there's logic and there's reason as to why that's happening, but you don't see the same rhetoric in Asia right now.
That's quite interesting. Look, I mean, I don't know much about Asia, so I assume, right? But I'm glad you explain it, and you live there. So, and again, sometimes people, because of ignorance, they just might say, "I never go to Asia." But based on what you're saying, is, oh, maybe Asia is one place I should be going and take a look and see how life is
Mm.
there, at least for vacation.
Yes.
But this is great. Do you think Asia is gonna be your forever home? Is that a place you think you're gonna die there, or you planning on?
I don't. The honest answer is I don't know. And I wonder if any immigrant ever truly knows, because there's always, I think once you've spent a really long time somewhere, then you will feel forever divided. That there's
Right.
a part of me now that is, I mean, me and my husband, we joke about this all the time, where we say that actually he's way more, in inverted commas, way more Western in his thinking than I am, and I'm way more Asian in my thinking than he is. What I actually think is probably that both of us are just defying expectations, and we're actually probably somewhere in the middle. We're probably very close to one another in terms of where we sit on those sorts of spectrums. But the point being that there is now a part of me that will forever be tied to the life that I've built here in Asia. But equally, it's not like I can deny the background and the wonderful memories and the childhood that I had in Europe. And there are principles and ideologies that are very European, that really define the way that I think about the world, that are not Asian at all.
Right.
And so there's always going to be that collision of cultures that's happening inside of me. Yeah, I think to try and predict at this current stage, so which one's going to win out at the end, I honestly have no idea, because
I,
both of them are really important to me.
right. That's going through my mind right now. So I'm 53 years old, right? So that's what my brain
Mm.
is processing, because I think about my childhood and my friendships. So Argentinian, for example, are very family oriented. When I mean
Yep.
family oriented, it's like not a little bit, a lot. Sometimes too
Yes,
much,
yes, yes.
right? So that's
I've heard this as a stereotype, but
right,
I'm
right,
not gonna paint
right,
you with a brush unless you say so.
right. In Argentina, the dad lives here, and then the daughter buys a house right here, and the son buys all in the same block or in the same neighborhood, right? So they're all there, and that's not. I mean, United States, capitalism economy, right? It's a
Mm.
consumer society. People don't have time for family. I mean, they do family stuff. I don't know if it was always like that or not. I have no idea. But here, you always buying, and you have no time, because your job is to spend and buy and have the nice car, all this stuff, everything in credit, right? And that take you away from your family. And in Argentina, people don't. You cannot get a credit. It's just not gonna happen unless you have millions of dollars. But if you have millions of dollars, I buy it cash. I don't need credit. So people
Mm.
don't have. We don't have the financial system to provide credit, and so most people, live there. They're all together, right? They help each other. Sometimes they inherited the parents' house when they die, that kind of stuff. So always
Mm.
together, and it's a cultural shock at the beginning, right? Because you don't have that connection with people. The connection is not there. Right? People are
Mm.
very nice here. I read one of your posts, like when you went back to England, people were like, "Hi, thank you, I'm sorry, excuse me."
Yes.
That's here's like
Yes,
that.
yes,
Like
yes. I
first
remember that.
time, first time my wife was in the US, like, why people are saying sorry all the time? Why they open the door for you?
Oh, wow.
That sounds fake on a way. She said, like, are they really mean it?
Mm.
I don't know. I don't know. I never put any thoughts into it. I actually adopt it. And it's funny because when I go back to Argentina, I do that to people. I hold the door open. Excuse me, I'm sorry. People are like, they don't get, you know,
Yeah, it's like, who are
what,
you?
who are you?
What did you
Right,
just do?
right, right.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
and I know I read something about you too. They say reverse culture, right? Going back to
Mm.
England. And yeah, so at my 53, I'm thinking maybe I want to, maybe I want to retire in Argentina, but at the same time, I had to retire there because I don't want to start all over again,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah, it's
going back is starting
such a
again.
tough call. Yeah, I totally hear you. It's a really, really difficult call. I think my parents are getting to that stage now where they're having to make that choice of,
Right,
are we going to start back in France, where my dad's from? For a long time, that was what they were thinking. But now the realization of, but you'd have to create a community for yourself again is coming to them. And so now it's like, oh, well, I guess the consideration that they've got now is, where do we already have a community so we don't have to start again? Because I mean, that is quite a scary prospect, isn't it? And I think
right,
one thing that I think you do sacrifice as an immigrant, there's a lot that you gain as an immigrant. And I will forever be grateful and forever changed for the international experiences that I've had. I'm so, so grateful for them. But there's always a consequence to decisions that you make, right? And that is the consequence that I have friends of mine who've never really left the place where we grew up. And so they've got a really tight knit community there. They've got friends that they've had for life. And funnily enough, actually, Singapore is one of those places where that realization hits you very hard, because a lot of Singaporeans live in a way that you just described, where they're probably the next. So most people live in tower blocks here. They're called HDBs. And most people live maybe a couple of tower blocks away from their parents, their grandparents,
Right.
their childhood friends. I was at a birthday party for one of my Singaporean friends not that long ago, and she was celebrating a joint birthday milestone with one of her best friends, and she had known that best friend since kindergarten. And that I found completely insane to me.
Right.
Like the friend that I would say is still genuinely a friend of mine that I have the longest history with, I would say is, by my standards, it's college, but that's not what you would say in the US. So I met her when I was 16. Let's go with that.
Right. That would be, yes, I know.
It's like
I
a
don't
high
know if it's
school or something like that, right?
high school,
It'd be high
right.
school for you. For me, it's college. But point being, like, that is the earliest true friend that I can still think that I have contact with right now. And she's one. Then the next ones are from my university days. And I can think of maybe 3 or 4 that I still
Right.
keep regularly in touch with, that I really, really care about. But otherwise, all my friends are kind of scattered to the wind. I have friends who are here in Singapore, but I have friends who used to live in Singapore and have since moved either to another country or back to their home country. I have people still back in the UK, people still back in France, people still back in Japan from when I used to live there. I have friends who, I mean, I've got friends everywhere, but that means that there's no central location. When we get to see each other once in a blue moon, it's amazing. But the tight-knit community that you were describing in Argentina, the tight-knit community that I see many people enjoying here in Singapore, for an immigrant, that's a very difficult thing to capture. And it's one of those things that we were talking about acceptance right at the beginning. I
Yeah.
would say out of everything that I've had to accept as an immigrant outside of my home country, that's probably been the toughest.
I agree. That's one thing. I mean, 200% I agree with you, because I think every immigrant goes through that to a certain level, right? Depends on the culture, but that's the biggest thing you sacrifice. Like I'm on Facebook and I see we call it secondary in Argentina. We don't call it high school. It's a
It's very
primary,
confusing then. It's all
secondary,
over the
right?
place.
Right. Primary, secondary, and then you got university, right?
Yeah, okay.
And I see them that they all graduated together and they're there, and
Yeah.
they have a different reunion where they all get together, and I see them picture hugging each other, and I don't have that. I don't have it. And here in Louisiana, where
Yeah.
I live, actually it's a French culture state, because we bought it from the French. I mean, we obviously the Americans did.
Yeah,
I'm
of
in
course.
Louisiana, so people speak Cajun French over here, by the way.
Oh, no way.
And
I didn't know
yeah,
that.
yes, it's speak Cajun
Very cool.
French. Yeah, and then their English is mixed with Cajun French words, right? For people that have been here the longest or were born here, so they have a very hard
Okay.
English to understand. But anyway, long story short, here they have a little bit more of that sense of family and being together and spend a lot more time together. So I moved here 7 years ago because of work. I work in technology, so my job brought me here. But what's interesting is the first time I feel something a little closer to what I used to experience when I was back in Argentina. But it's never the same. So you try to find something that make you feel closer to where you were before or how it was, but it's not the same. So it's a big sacrifice. It's the toughest thing you go through. And
Yeah.
and as an older person right now, I'm gonna say like I'm 70 or 60. I'm 53, but at my age, these things are starting being heavy for me. Like, I
Yeah.
start thinking like I need that. But look, I think to close, I know you have another meeting soon, so you have to go, and
Yes.
I don't want
The
you to be late.
wonderful beauty of time differences here.
I know.
'Cause what time is it for you right now? It's really late for
Right
you
now
right now.
is 8:41 here at night. So
10 p.m.
yes,
on the day before your 13th
right.
of November,
I'm
right?
on Thursday, so you're in the future. So I'm technically talking
And
to
I'm in
someone
the future. I'm
Right.
Friday. It's 20 to 11 a.m. here. So yeah, it's a crazy, crazy, crazy
I
time
know.
difference.
Before you go, if we have at least 5 minutes, if you have the 5 minutes, talk
Yeah,
about
all
what you
good.
do for a living. I seen it. I know you do. It's all about culture, right? And you train leaders
Yes.
and communication. Talk about that. I want to know more about it.
Amazing. So By day, I am a corporate trainer, but I specialize in communication skills for senior executives in multinational businesses. And when I say communication skills, a large part of what I teach and what I've done a lot of studying on, I actually just graduated from an accreditation, like an advanced accreditation in this, but I teach them cultural intelligence, which is essentially what we've been discussing today, the idea
Right.
of how do you bridge perspectives between people so that you can lead effectively in multicultural situations. Because when you're working in global business, this is going to happen a lot, right? You're
Right.
not just going to be working with people who come from a similar background to you. Likelihood is, A, you're going to maybe have international colleagues that are coming in to whichever location you are. You may have to travel quite a lot. You probably have to engage with leaders in other jurisdictions and other
Hmm.
geographies. And so, how do you do that with grace, with poise, with patience and curiosity and understanding? One of my big beliefs, and one of the things that I try to challenge a lot in any training and any workshop that I ever deliver, is that we have been taught for a very long time now that leadership is supposed to look a certain way. And if I ask you to imagine what you think a leader looks like, you tell me if you resonate with this. But I
Hmm.
personally get the idea of someone who is loud, big, bold, charismatic, knows how to do the sales pitch, etc., but then probably likes to lead in a way that says, I'm your buddy, I'm your friend. Come talk to me. We can be open, we can be honest. Let's have radical candor among us all. And let's just give it to each other straight, right? This is kind of the image that I get. And if you get something similar, that wouldn't be surprising because this is a study that was done by actually a very close friend of mine. His name is David Livermore, and he was the founder of the Cultural Intelligence Center in the US and is
Hmm.
considered one of the leading, I guess, thought leaders in this space. He did a study a few years ago that found that 90% of the leadership content, the leadership literature that you have ever read was written specifically to lead in a Western context. In other words, it's what you might expect to see, would work really well in the US, would probably work well in the UK, and anything that is kind of Anglo-Saxon in the way that it operates. It's a leadership model that was designed to work very well in those sorts of environments. But then the thing is that the English language, and I think I was just having a conversation with someone about this on LinkedIn yesterday.
Yeah.
The reality is that the English language has a very long colonial history and therefore was able to move very quickly in terms of global business, therefore became the de facto language in global business.
Right.
And the mindset that comes with the English language followed. So we've got this leadership profile that has been disseminated through the English language throughout the whole world. And it tells you, you are supposed to be a leader that looks like this. Yet the reality is that those things that I was just saying, the loud, bold, charismatic,
Right.
likes to lead as if everyone's their buddy and their friend, etc., that is just one potential cultural perspective that you could have in this world. And the study that David did essentially found that a good 70% of the world does not operate like that at all. So, how can one leadership profile and one way of interacting with people possibly cater to every single person, every single employee, every single business? How could it possibly cater to all that variety and diversity that exists in the world? It can't. And that's not because it's a bad leadership profile. It's
Right.
not. But it cannot be the only leadership profile. So, yeah, a lot of what I'm teaching when I teach communication skills is to encourage the leaders to find whatever is their true, authentic leadership style, not the leadership style that has been imposed on them or that they feel, oh, but I've read all these books and it tells me that I have to be a leader like this, even though it feels super uncomfortable for me. Like I don't resonate or identify with this kind of persona and personality at all.
Right.
Like I meet so many people who think, well, I have to be like this to be a leader, but I'm not comfortable being like that. That's not me. And
Right.
so the way that I teach my workshops is then don't be that person.
Right.
If that's not you, then don't be that person.
Right.
There are definitely techniques in terms of how you can improve communication skills so that you can create more clarity and be more articulate, but you don't have to change who you are at your core. You don't have to change your identity in order to be a good leader. I've always
Right.
thought of cultural intelligence like learning a language.
Right.
So if you feel like you have to change who you are as a person in order to be able to fit within an environment, I think that that is wrong. That essentially
Absolutely.
means that
Yeah.
There's no sense of belonging. There's no sense of inclusion. There's no sense or respect for the way that you see the world and your cultural perspective. If you think that you, at your very, very, very core, in your heart of hearts, you have to change the person that you are to succeed, that's awful. But
I agree.
if what you think is, well, I need to adapt my communication style so that my audience can clearly understand what it is that I want to say, that for me doesn't have to be an affront on your authentic self.
Right.
It's you learning a language, you adapting your language so that another
Right.
person can understand you. Like if I know that I'm in a room with someone who speaks French and doesn't speak English, I'm
Right.
going to speak French. And that doesn't mean that I suddenly lost the person that I am. I didn't.
Right.
But I did adapt my language so that the other person could understand me. So the principles that I teach in my workshops are, how can you distinguish what is who you are as a person
Right.
versus how you speak and the language that you use? And how can you marry the two so that you can be an effective leader that communicates with clarity, but that is still true to who you are at your core?
Right. Look, I love what you just say. I don't know if you knew this, but I'm a former CIO, and
I did not know that.
yeah, I'm a former CIO, and today I'm a VP, right? But I was a CIO a year ago, so I know a little bit about leadership. I'm not an expert, but something that resonates with me is about, first of all, the West has flaws in leadership. I mean, they have this model of looks like everybody's nice and stuff, but there's also flaws in communication. The communication usually is where a lot of even these top-notch executives fail. And everybody has their own style, as you say. I have a very unique way of leading, right? And I lead based on trust. That's what I do. For me, trust is everything. So if I trust you, I'm not going to question you too much. I might ask you a question to understand and, to understand what you're doing, to follow up with you, but not because I don't trust you, right? And I struggle with my way of leading with other executives, the way they lead, because it's completely different. And but I want to be me. That's why I'm bringing this out, because I like to be me. I have today I lead a group of 21 IT tech people, right? And some of them are like, hey, I had to go home because my wife is a teacher and something happened. I got to watch my son today for a few hours. Is that okay? Sure, go. Because I trust you. I know I trust you. So for me, I built that trust from the beginning, right? And to build trust, you need to have communication. You can't have one without the other, right? Nobody's going to trust you. You don't communicate. So that's the two things that I do. So like I said, I'm not perfect, but I try to stick to my style. I'm pretty sure a lot of people, especially old school people, don't agree with the way I do things, but I lead most of it people in their 20s or 30s, and they have a different way of thinking. So yeah, and sometimes my wife, she asks me like, why you do this? I mean, we don't do this in Ukraine. Well, this is the West, now Ukraine, and I treat them like that, and I show them respect, and I trust them, right? And I don't have expectations, right? But I know they will do well, and I have a great team. I have a great team. And if I have something to fix at 1, 2 in the morning, they do it because of that. I know if I ask them if you can work late today, they trust me. They know I'm not doing it on purpose. So,
Yeah.
but
That's great what you say.
yeah,
It's great what you say, that you feel like you've really found your own style. And
yeah,
the thing that I realize the more that I work with these various leaders, particularly out here in Asia Pacific, I fly around quite a lot in Asia Pacific, going into various
hmm
markets to deliver these workshops and to deliver these
yeah,
trainings. But one of the things that I realize is it takes a lot of conviction to stand by what you believe is your leadership style.
right,
Because again, particularly because I'm thinking from a global context, and a lot of the people that I work with are working across borders, and therefore with people with sometimes extremely different opinions to them. The temptation sometimes can be to follow the status quo and to just do what is expected of you, because that's going to be the path of least resistance. But the path of least resistance can very often, I find, come at
right,
a significant cost to whether you actually believe in it.
right,
Is this you? Is it you at all?
right,
And I've met far too many people who turned around to me and basically said, oh, I had to channel a completely different person in order to succeed. I really really, really don't think that you have to do that. I don't think it's easy, though. I don't think it's easy to stand by your convictions and to fight the fight that says, I'm going to adapt my communication so that you can understand where I'm standing from. Because again, that's not the path of least resistance. That essentially means you're going to have some to and fro. You're going to have lots of conversations. You're going to have to persuade and influence people
Right.
to kind of take a moment to see things from your perspective. It's not easy,
It's
but
not
I
easy.
I
Right.
stand firm that it is absolutely possible. And I would like to think that when people are able to marry those two things together and they feel like, yes, I'm now leading and I'm leading in a way that actually speaks to me and speaks to the I don't know, the moral compass that I have or whatever it
Right.
may be. When they find that, then it's that much more rewarding and that
Right.
much more sustainable. And let's face it, when you are a leader and you're a leader with a lot of pressures on you, if you've got to be that person and also feel like you're acting the
Right.
entire time,
Absolutely. You
that is
can't
a
fake it.
recipe for burnout.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. It's what's interesting is like if you're a manager or even a director at that level, there's a little more flexibility of how you want to, even you want to pretend that you lead in a certain way. In the executive world, right, once you get into that group, that's a tight group. So being an executive I'm executive for a public company, right?
Mm,
And public company, once you get into that group, it's almost like a cult, right? They let you in, right? But they try to find someone they kind of match their style, what they do, right? Once you get in, you got to prove that you're that guy that can run, a $260 million whatever the sales is, right? This is, I mean, I don't have time to describe all the conversation that happen there at this level, but when you want to challenge these people with your own management style, if you're blessed to be with someone open-minded, that's good, right? Which I've been blessed because the CEO, he just let me run. Even if other executives might criticize my style or not see me at their level, but the CEO just go, right?
yeah,
But at that level, it's really hard to stand for yourself and say, I want to, because now you have to show that you're part of them and you want to stay there. That's how they pay you a lot, right?
it is. It is. I don't disagree with you.
Right.
It's a tough battle to
Yeah.
stay true to who you are.
Right.
But it's if you manage and you get there, then afterwards you get to start changing the rules, right? And that's the thing. If we consider global
Hmm.
business as you kind of have to play the game to win the game, if you win the
Right.
game, you get to change it.
Right.
So once you stand at the top and you show actually there's a different way that you can do leadership, amazing.
Right.
More people can follow. So for me, the mission is how can we get more people to get to those really top upper echelons to then show people that it can be done differently because it absolutely can and it should be. Again, it's not that one leadership profile is wrong. It's not. It's definitely not a bad leadership profile. It's just it cannot be the only one. That cannot be the only version of success that this world can ever know. It's just not
Right.
true. But we have a tendency to uphold one persona more than others. So I think that needs a shakeup.
Right. I mean, if you look at the president of any country, that's an executive role, right? So if you look at
Absolutely,
Donald
yeah,
Trump or if you look at Elon Musk, all these geniuses, right? They all have different style, but either you
yeah.
like it or not, they have been successful in their own way. They all
Mm.
been successful. You can't deny it. But I mean, is that the way you want to do things? I mean, I don't know, but they made it.
I think let's think of to stand true to yourself and to stand authentically means to be a magnet. And a magnet, it attracts, but it also
Yes.
repels. It is very normal that some people will disagree with you
Yeah.
when you stand firm. And I think that we need to make space to be okay with that.
Right.
Because again, you don't have to agree with every single person in the room. You don't have to always
Right.
do things exactly the same as every person in the room.
Right.
That's not the goal. The goal is whether we can allow space for it in a way that doesn't divide us, and in a way that allows us to be curious and say, okay,
Right.
well, you have strengths where I have weaknesses and vice versa. And you were able to approach things in a way that I would never have considered before. That's interesting to me. Maybe I don't agree with it, but it's interesting. And somewhere in the midst of all that is where solutions are going to be born, where problems are going to be solved, where we're going to get our most creative ideas, because we don't get creativity when we all agree. We get creativity, we get innovation, and we get movement, momentum when there is a bit of room for friction.
Right.
That's the sparks happen. That's where the magic happens.
Right.
So it's just allowing space for it in a way that doesn't mean you're attacking me.
Right.
Because you're not. You're not. You're just,
Right.
you're different to me and I'm different to you, and that is okay.
I agree with that. And that's what actually allowed that to happen. And I'm going back to trust and communication, right? Because within my team, on a small scale, right? Because not the executive scale, they can argue with each other. And then,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was wrong, or I go with your idea, right? Just because there's trust. And there could be friction, there could be problem, doesn't matter. Trust allow you to have that, because I trust you that you just challenge me on an idea. It's not personal. But at the executive, you probably need to go, right? You need to go. But
yes, I am going to need to go.
Sorry,
but,
this guy very interesting.
we could carry on. This is like one of my big soapboxes, so we could go on all day, and I would have stuff to say about.
I know, I can tell, because I also get carry on. But at the executive level, sometimes you don't have that, because it's a bigger beast and it's hard. It's not trust. The perfect scenario. So if the CEO can build the capsule, and then we can all fight within each other and be friends within an hour. But that doesn't happen. But anyways, I know you gotta go. Maybe we do a part 2 where we want to talk about this stuff. But it's I get carry on because I learn a lot about.
There's plenty to unpack here. It's one of my favorite topics.
Yeah. That's what you do for a living, so I can only imagine, right? But anyways, it was a pleasure to have you. Thank you for being part of my podcast. It was a great podcast. You're a great communicator, right?
Thank
you. The way you explain things is amazing, And I think the audience not gonna have an issue understanding you. They might not understand me. So it's great. I want to thank you again, and maybe we do a part 2.
Sure. I'd be happy anytime. Thank you so much.
Thank you.